It is a great honor and a privilege to introduce Professor Stephen Copeland. We're here in your wonderful apartment in Jerusalem. You originally come from America. So if you could tell us a little bit about the background of yourself and your family.
Yes. Well, of course, I originally come from the carbon and the stuff that through asteroids, I think, Jews asteroid that hit the Earth, and then unbelievable. It took and a lot of scientists. I mean, Carl Sagan, if you remember him, a lot of philosophers, our present philosophers. What's his name? The linguist at Harvard, and left-wing political activist. The moment
maybe Noam Chomsky.
Yes, Noam Chomsky. Noam Chomsky also talks about this. That the wonder. I mean, is more likely than not that in this huge universe, there may not be life, especially self-conscious life, other than on this planet. And somehow, after millions of years of this carbon, this difference, some stuff there from this asteroid percolated, and the miracle of life, and again, that is conscious of what's around and of the self, is incredible. Now, Noam Chomsky is also among our many intellectuals and scientists telling us about global warming. Global warming, the last about 7 years are the hottest each year afterwards, on average. In other words, you can have very strong winters. And by the way, some of these strong winter storms, the climate scientists tell us, are made worse by global warming, because in the upper atmosphere there's all kinds of stuff going on that's related to global warming in the winter that can even cause that cold. But on average, the years are the hottest years on record, and record means hundreds of thousands, even millions of years. How can we check that? Through trees, the roots and the thing, and through outer space, all kinds of different things that the scientists now can do to know the how old the Earth and the temperatures of the and what the scientists are telling us is in about 50 years, if we don't lessen and reach within about 12 years the amount of fossil fuels that we're throwing into the atmosphere, carbon, because everything we produce, paper, everything, all material things we produce, furniture, everything, you have to have fuel, energy to produce it. And we're doing fossil fuels. We're starting to move away, but not enough yet. If we continue to do this, if we don't change that completely within about 12 years or 80-90%, they're telling us that in about 50 years, it will be uninhabitable for human beings and most other. And this is incredible. We said that can't be true. This is what they're telling us. So we have a tremendous challenge, and it's related to Holocaust, of course. We say, I had someone this morning also who lives in this building. How are things, He asked me, people always ask how are things, in Hebrew and English. How's life? And they're surprised because I'm supposed to say, thank God, everything is fine, or I say thank God. But what I say is, in Hebrew, meguvanim, they're gradations. It's a variation. That's how life is. On one hand, there's the most amazing beauty and goodness and compassion and joy and wonderment. On the other hand, there's terrible suffering of disease and of loneliness and of part of the human condition, and then also terrible things that human beings do, like what we call Holocaust. I'll come to again, Paul Celan says we should call it, he calls it that which happened over there. But I'll come back to that. That which happened over there. And what I'll say already now, he says, once you have a word, and Ernest Becker says that, once you have a word for something, you don't have to think about it, really. We think that Ernest Becker, in his book, The Denial of Death, as soon as you have a word for something, in a way, it helps you, to think. You then say, yes, that. But also, as soon as you have a word, he says beauty, terror, then you say, I know what beauty is. Oh, yeah, I know what terror is. You don't really have to think about it, because you have that word. Oh, yeah, the Holocaust. But the word terror or beauty, what it stands for is really, something else. And so, language is so important. So again, we say, how is life? So they ask me, how is life? So I say it's meguvanim. It's variation. You've got this, and in the middle you have everything else. I said always that was the human species, and always it will probably be the human species if it doesn't end, from global warming in 50 years or something. But this, now you come back also to thank God. I'm a religious person. I started when I was about 18 because I grew up in a family that was Jewish. Indeed, my mother, this is a picture of her when she was a singer on the Yiddish Hebrew radio in Boston when she was in her 20s and 30s. And then when she was older, she sang for Hadassah and other Jewish organizations and synagogues, Yiddish and Hebrew music. But she already was second generation, and her Yiddish, she couldn't really speak Yiddish. She knew what she was singing, so it was a very Jewish home in many ways. We had a Pesach Seder, and but we didn't, they didn't really know what mitzvot, Kabbalah, halacha, Jewish law, commandments. That really they didn't know about.
Did your mother light candles?
She did light candles, and Pesach there'd be matzah and there'd be a seder, as best that we knew. And also, I grew up with the notion of God loving us, and this was very much part. But probably the most formative experience in my life was that my first sister, I now enjoy. I'm now blessed, graced with a brother, Scott, who lives in Israel. He's 15 years younger than I am, and my sister Sherry, who lives in the States. And she's was born about a year after my brother, Scott. He also works in Jewish education here in Israel. And now why the 15-year difference in age from me with my brother and second sister? Because I had a first sister, and this over here, if the camera can see, there's a picture of her. Her middle name was Hope, Sandra Hope Copeland. Here she is with myself when I was about 6 years old. Can you see it?
I'm just going to... so you are... And that's your father?
And this is my father. And it took me... So here I'm about 6 years old. I was 5 when my first sister was born. But she was born with lung cancer. And you can't really see in these pictures, but she breathed her 2 years of life through a pipe in her tracheotomy, they called it, in her throat. Very primitive, because it would often get unconnected, and my parents would have to rush her to the Boston Children's Hospital, which was one of the greatest children's hospitals in the world, and that was then. And we lived about 40 minutes drive south of Boston. And I remember playing with her, I remember being with her, and I remember, her death when I was 7. That, I think was the most influential experience, for me. It made me feel compassion. It made me feel that it's not about me. It's about being with others, caring for others, And in this photo, it took me many years to see that my father and myself are looking kind of over there with tremendous concern.
That's so true.
That was her middle name, Hope. So that was very influential for me. I was sharing with you, Les, earlier, because someone already this morning when I left for some grocery shopping and then came back here to meet you here, asked me, how is life, Eich HaChaim? And I said, it's varied, it's varied. And even, I said, at one end, you also have not only difficult experiences because the human being is fragile and open to the vagaries of health and of all kinds of things that we don't decide. But also, there's the most cruel, horrific, comes to Holocaust, what happened over there, stuff that has, events, actions that human beings do to other human beings that is incomprehensible, terrible. Now we say terrible people. Terrible people. But I was just sharing, with you, Les, right before we started the film, that I just gave two of my drawings to my optometrist. These are new glasses, eyeglasses, just last week. He gave me the eyeglasses ready. And so I came by with two of my drawings as a gift, as an expression of my appreciation to him. And he said, "Oh, these are amazing. I mean, but you haven't signed your name. Would you sign your name on them?" And I say, I don't write my name on any of my drawings. Here, my apartment is full of my drawings. He says, "Why?" I say, "Because my whole life is it's not about me. It's not me, I. It's about the other, especially if they're different in the age or political opinion or gender or race or religion or, we have more in common with people of other religions and of no religion, more in common of other ethnicities than we have differences. And I think it's about me. And I was also sharing with Les, my foot had a operation a few years ago, and it went fairly well, but some complications that can't be fixed. So, people will, and also my back, I was born with an extra vertebra, and also a curved spine. So, people, and I'm now almost 70, so, I get on a bus, people want to give me their seat, or I walk down the street, "Oh, can I help you carry something?" So I'm stubborn, so I usually don't let them. But when I do let them, and if I don't, I give my little speech that, "Oh, but that's wonderful of you, because what's most important is the other person, not me. And here you're thinking of me, of another person, a stranger even, This is what's most important." So what I was starting to say about terrible people, in other words, they do the most, inconceivably bad stuff. But we are the sum total of all of our experiences. I'm convinced of that. 100%. And that's what I wrote, because he insisted, he pushed me a little bit more, the optometrist, "Would you just sign your name? I'd love you to write your name." So I said, okay. So I wrote my name, but you who are seeing this video, maybe from what I've already said, you're getting to know me a little bit and my stubbornness. I said, all right, so I'll write my name. So I wrote my name, and then I wrote, but really, I'm not the one that made these drawings. What made these drawings is the michlol in Hebrew, from the word kol, klal, the michlol. the total gamut, all of the events that have happened to me have made me who I am. Now, it's the same thing. If a person is born in a very poor country, all right, well, some wealthy donor might come by and, help them to get an education in the States or whatever, but that's not likely. If you're from a very, very poor country, and if you have, or even not, but you have this and that happen in your family, and this and that and other things happen, this makes you who you are. A terrible person is somebody who is the result of these terrible things. He or she is not terrible, but the deeds are terrible. And if they're really terrible, you can't let them go around doing those deeds, right? But you can't be really ethical as a society if you only lock them up, or even, if capital punishment, if you punish them. No. You can't let them go around the street. I mean, you have to do something like that if they do terrible things. And you have to teach other people that it's terrible. But that's not enough, because what you really have to do is say, well, it's the conditions that made them terrible. So what we have to do is make sure, excuse me, I'm being personal here, but that's what this whole video is about. You don't have to agree with me, anybody listening to my story here. But Bernie Sanders, and now Biden is adopting all of his stuff. In 2016, when he said $15 an hour, and he said global warming, and he said labor unions, and he said the most wealthy people have to pay their fair share, like they actually did years ago. This is to say, and everyone should have the chance of a college education, and that there should be daycare. And if people can't afford that, society has to help, because we are the sum total of these experiences. And if you want good people, you have to have the conditions, the environing conditions be good. So yes, I say all of that about my view of life. Now, Janusz Korczak. When did I hear about Janusz Korczak? I was already, I don't remember exactly, 25, 28, 32.
So can I just ask, Prof,
Yes.
You mentioned that I think you're around 18 that you became more observant, or more.
Yes.
Well, what happened?
Well,
What
that was
spurred
my,
that on?
thank you. That was my first year in Israel.
You came to your first time
After
that
high
you had come to
school.
Israel?
Yes, for a year.
Were you at a Jewish day school before?
No, I was at a public school, and in my small town, south of Boston, and there were only, there was a small Jewish community there, But I never knew the word commandment. I never knew commandments, mitzvot. I knew customs and ceremonies, But then there was starting a Young Judea club in the winter months, and one of my best friends asked, invited me, and I said, I wasn't that interested. I was Jew, I enjoyed, I related to Judaism somewhat, but so I didn't.
What type of synagogue were your parents?
It was a conservative, so-called conservative synagogue. So I wasn't going to go, but my mother insisted I go to a few meetings, Young Judea. And lo and behold, they have camps all over the United States. But most summer camps are for 11, 12, 13, 14 years old. And then when you're maybe 15, you can help, but the real teachers and counselors are older than that. But Young Judea has had and has about 6 of such camps throughout the United States. But there's also what we call the National Camp, Tel Yehuda, which is in upstate New York, in the, where nature is, not in the city. And there, unusual, is the age of the campers is 13 to 18 years old, are campers. And there's about 500 of them each summer. And this was, I'm now talking about when I was active. I was active there for 19 years on the staff, including being the educational director of the summer camp and the national educational director of the whole country. And I was there for 19 summers on the staff of this camp. And even when I lived in Israel, most of those years I went back for the summer. And many people, a couple of thousand who in the world, and many of them live in Israel, what can I do? Consider me their most influential teacher. By the way, I've taught at Boston University. I've taught 19 years at Hebrew College in Boston, and I've taught full-time 7 years as a professor at Hebrew University, Jewish philosophy and education, working with teachers. But I just mentioned the word teaching. Very important for me is that I do not call, I think language is very important to we Jews, to many cultures. I don't call or know what I do with so-called students as teaching. I know it as sharing. And I do it as sharing. And I invite them to share, with me. And yeah.
So how old were you when you came to Israel?
So I came for a year when I was 18.
This was for the young Judea?
Yeah, and then I continued to Brandeis for my undergraduate.
And what subjects did you take in your undergraduate?
Mainly Bible, with especially Michael Fishbane, who then went to Chicago after many years, Chicago University, very influential. And how was he influential? Because he took the words not as history or not literally, but figuratively as dramas about the human situation, the universal human situation. And my first year in Israel, I was graced to meet one of my two most influential teachers, if you can see this, Michael Rosenack. We know him as Mike. And I don't know if you can see it over there. Can you move?
Sure.
This is a drawing of mine of Mike. You can maybe see a little bit.
It's very nice, yeah.
Yeah. And this is my drawing of Rabbi Isidore Yitzchak Twersky, who was, here's another, it was a close-up of this drawing. And this is based on a photograph that I just added, some color to. Yitzchak Isidore Twersky was, for many years, the head of the Jewish Studies Department at Harvard, where I did my doctorate at Harvard. Technically in the education department, but I took many courses, in the Jewish Studies department also.
And you had a personal connection with
yeah, and Rabbi Twersky, Professor Twersky, who married one of the two daughters of Rabbi Soloveitchik, and he was heir to a Hasidic line.
Yeah.
Menachem Nachum of Chernobyl was the first one to carry the Twersky family name. That was a more modern idea of having these last names. And I was basically adopted, as we call it in Hebrew, as a Ben Bayit, as a member of the family, when I was in Boston for 19 years, and when I was already, before that, a student for 4 years at Harvard for my doctorate, when I first met Rabbi Twersky. I forget if it was Rabbi Twersky, Professor Twersky, or if it was his life companion, Atara, who was also a professor of American history, and she taught at Brookline High School for many years. But I don't remember if it was, they would have other guests, on Shabbat and holidays at their table. But usually, often anyway, I don't know about usually, but often it was only myself. And I forget if it was he or if it was she, but one time one of them said, Steve is the last of our children to still be at home,
Wow.
because their other 3 children, when I first met them, when I first met Rabbi Twersky, they were in high school, but then they went off to college and went off to, New York and YU, Yeshiva University. So yes, I became very close. And so he became my also very formative teacher. His ideas, so much of it was so rich and so realistic, but caring. Menachem Nachman of Chernobyl, that we just mentioned, the first to carry the Twersky name. He says in one of these, books right here, he says that Hebrew University put out in Hebrew that yes, God has given us haftachot, promises of a messianic age, and etc. But He's also given us free will, b'chira chovshit. And here's a radical, creative, noaz, bold interpretation. Experience. That Menachem Nachman Chernobyl says, well, so remember what we just said. On the one hand, the divine is given us haftachot, promises, a vision of the messianic, that things will be will be better, will be fixed, but also has given us free will, b'chira chovshit. And Menachem Nachman Chernobyl says, if we mess up with our free will, there won't be messianic, it won't be.
Wow.
So, the other thing I want to share with you, this is probably too long, I hope you can edit this.
No, this is very good.
But I have to share with you that several of my friends says I should write a book of collection of these. I'm not exaggerating. With the virus, I haven't been doing it, but now I've started, of course, to return doing it. I engage complete strangers in the street. An example is, I'll give you a few examples. An example is, I'm standing with some other people at a red light for pedestrians. You have to wait till the light for pedestrians changes because the traffic is going. So I'm standing there, and somebody comes up on a bicycle. Could be 60 years old, 16 years old, or I'll share with you an example, a 9 or 10-year-old. So a 9 or 10-year-old comes up and he stops with his bike, the red light for pedestrians, and he's got talit katan, tzitzit. I also do, but I don't wear them outside. Why? A lot of people don't know this. A lot of people, including many Hasidim, tens of thousands, hundreds. The Ari, Isaac Luria of Tzfat, said that, and Rabbi Twersky took this view, that Uritem Oto, look at the blue thread, you shall see it, but not others, because it's between you and God. And by the way, now that's not the halakha, you don't have to do that, but there are opinions like that. Now, when it comes to tefillin shel yad, that is the halakha. The tefillin is called an ot, a sign, and the halakha is lecha yeh la'ot v'lo la'achirim. So you're supposed to cover with your talit gadol or with your sleeve, and a lot of people don't know that, And that's very beautiful. Why is that important to me? Steve, why are you? How is all this connected? Well, first of all, I kind of think and experience and share like a Talmud page. It's very meguva. There's a lot of stuff happening there. It's associative. It's connect stuff that you don't see as being connected. So, to the inwardness, it's called in Hebrew pnimiyut. I love that, pnimiyut. Inside, the inwardness. This is so precious. It isn't to flaunt it, to get attention, from other people. So anyway, but this child, it's okay according to the halacha also to have them outside if you want. I mean, if you have them down to here, I don't like that. Yeah. Because I think that this is some sort of, something of displaying your, the relationship with the divine should be, at least in part, private and special.
Steve, can I just mention something on this? There's a halakha that if you go to a cemetery, you have to tuck in the tzitzit because those that have departed can't do mitzvot. And so
that's also
flaunting the mitzvah of tzitzit.
So
the custom is you have to actually tuck them in. You can't have it shown outside.
Yeah, so that's lovely. So this is another idea about it. So anyway, so I'm at the pedestrian light, and he comes up. People come up 60 years old, 16 years old. So far, no one has attacked me, by the way, because I said I'll give you one or two other examples. Because especially in Israel, people they have deep feelings about stuff. So anyway, because I'm being judgmental. So for instance, he comes up, and a lot of people, as I say, 60-year-old, 16-year-old, in this case, 9, 10-year-old with kippah and tzitzit. He stops for the red light, and he's standing next to me, and he has no helmet. He's got his bicycle. So I always start, unless there's something terrible happening, and then but usually it's not. I always start with, I say, So I said to him, Eifu akasta, where's your helmet? So he says to me, of course in Hebrew, he says, I asked my father for a helmet, but he said I don't need it. So I said to him, in Hebrew, I said, you tell your father that Steve said that by his not buying a helmet for you, he is violating several positive and negative commandments, to take care of oneself. But I will stop people in the street. I see people. Sometimes it's health things. Someone is smoking, and they're pushing a carriage or carrying an infant, and I say, it's considered a scientific fact, that smoking is cutting off time from our lives. It's hurting your lungs. And there's also, it's a now recognized scientific fact that secondary smoking, especially with an infant,
do they take it badly when you give them?
So far, no one has attacked me. Everybody has taken it well. Now, one time, I'm in Zion Square, in the middle, thoroughfare of stores and people singing and all kinds of things happening, and I see in the corner a few soldiers with what appears to be a Palestinian checking his papers, but I see them degrading him, mashpilim, kind of not hitting hard, but really not just looking over his papers and whatever. So I walked over and I said, first of all, I said to them, in Hebrew, thank you for your military service. And by the way, I do that a lot, even though, like Yeshayahu Leibovich, this is a drawing of mine of Yeshayahu Leibovich, who was a professor of chemistry and biology and encyclopedia, Jewish encyclopedia, Ishar Leibovich, who won the Israel Prize, which was very controversial because he was a very left-wing critic of a lot of Israeli policy, especially towards the Palestinians, and what he knew and I know as an occupation, even though a lot of people don't know this. Professor Leibovich, I call him prophet professor. He was like a biblical prophet. The prophets of the Bible, they criticize the strongest criticism of the king, of the ministers, of the government, of ancient Israel's, Judah's military policy, foreign policy, not taking care properly of the poor, etc. So I call him philosopher, prophet, Professor Yeshar Leibovich. He and I myself supported the 6 Days War. If you remember that war, we were surrounded by 3 different countries' armies, and it really looked like could be the end of the country. So we're a small country, so our armies had to push out and had to occupy the territories, some of the territory of Syria, a lot of it of the West Bank, and even of Egypt, the Sinai. But we have to try to find a way, especially towards the Palestinians, in my view, as is Martin Buber's view and Yashar Leibovich's view, and by the way, more or less Rabbi Tursky's view, and for sure Mike Rosenek's view, find a way to share the land together with equal or more or less equal rights, opportunities. Again, going back to what I talked about, bad people, it's not the people bad. We have to have opportunities that everybody can go to for a higher education, that everyone has childcare, that everyone, if they work hard, they make a certain level of salary, etc. And, Martin Buber, his Hebrew name was Mordechai, a lot of people don't know that. Martin Mordechai Buber, said this is only, and Akiva Ernst Simon, who was an Orthodox person, halachic person, and Judah Magnus, and what's his name? I forget now. They were Reforms, Jews. But Akiva Ernst Simon and Martin Buber talked about this country as a land of two peoples. It's Palestinian people, Jewish people, and of course also the Bedouin, the Druze, etc. We have to find a way to share. There should be a Jewish state, of course. There should be a Palestinian state. Now maybe it shouldn't have an army. That wouldn't be fair, but I have to first think about myself, and we have had a terrible conflict with them. Hillel said, one of the rabbinic founders of rabbinic Judaism, if I'm not for myself, who will be for me? I have to first be for myself. If I let people kill me, if I'm dead, it's kind of a problem, So.
But he also continues to say, and if I'm only for myself.
Exactly.
Then what am I?
Yeah. But notice you quoted the second half correctly, because notice the contrast. If I'm not for myself, who am I? But if I'm only for myself, what am I? It's so bad if I'm only for myself that I'm actually not a who. I'm not a person. I still have to be first for myself, because if you're dead, it's not a good thing. So even if you're not a person, then at least you're alive, maybe could become a person. But if I'm only for myself, who am I? So first of all, yes, I have to. So our relationship with the Palestinians, we've done terrible things to them. They've done terrible things to us. And the country is small, So I would say, yeah, I don't think they should be able to have an army or an air force or, a navy. Is that fair? No. But since I have more power, I have to keep it because of my experience as a Jew in the world at large, in Europe, and also here with the Palestinians. But I want to find a way to turn them from enemies to help contribute.
But it must be mutual. You have
yes.
to have both sides.
And today there are many Palestinians, including basically most, if you look at polls, So there are many that have come to recognize that we have rights here too, and that we have to, what we have to find is some way, to share the country more or less, By the way, a lot of people don't agree, and that's okay. But Daniel Barenboim, yes, a Jew born in Argentina, whose parents brought him to Israel. He's a very proud Israeli, but he also has criticized the ongoing occupation and many of the policies of Israel towards the Palestinians over many years, and has tried to contribute to that through the West-East Divan Orchestra, which brings together Jewish Israelis, Palestinian Israelis, Palestinians, Syrians, Lebanese, and they have to then listen to each other and in between their music making in order to play well together, and so it's not easy, but this is what we want to try to, get to arrive at, is a better world. And what we say we want for ourselves has to be for everybody. We don't want Holocaust to happen. Then we want to make sure that people who would do terrible things don't have the background which contributes to their being terrible people. But they're not innately terrible. If you go back and if we could see that they would have the opportunities of this and that and the other. So but I want to go back to one or two more examples of, if I can, of with.
So what happened? You saw the Israeli police with the Palestinian. And
yes.
What did you do?
So I first
resolve?
said, and I didn't add that I've been doing that now for 4 or 5 years. That not just with a situation like that, but just when I see soldiers in the street, man, woman in uniform, or I see them in a store, I go over to them and I say, thank you for your service, in Hebrew. And about a third of the time, I say to them, and I voted for Chadash in some of our elections and for, Meretz, in other words, left-wing parties. And when I say that, they usually look at me like, okay, then why are you thanking us for, our army service? You're a left-wing person, aren't you against the army or something, So then they don't say that, but I see sometimes in their faces. So well, how can you be appreciating the army and be left wing? So I then sometimes, about a third of the time, I then add, and I vote for this and that, but even I know that we're dead if we have to be strong. We have to have military strength. We have to be able to defend ourselves, and this is what it is. But we want to be recognized, and others want to be, and have the opportunities that can turn them from to people who have a reason to live in life and to be part of society and to interrelate with us. And
but Prof, I have to ask you.
Yes, please.
Doesn't it also upset you that if you look at, I don't want to get political, but if you look at Gaza, thousands and thousands of money, finance, instead of going to the welfare of the people which are impoverished,
yes,
is building these terror tunnels with the sole aim of to come in and destroy. Or the rockets.
Well, the rulers.
Instead of the rockets, money could have been spent on hospitals,
of course,
on improving the lot of indigenous people. But very few.
Listen. The rulers in the government, so-called, in Gaza is horrific. Terrible. That's totally no good. The polls show their own polls show that most of the citizens in Gaza have the same feeling, and they most of them have a lot of openness towards having a different relationship with Israel. But now, as to Abu Mazen and his people in the West Bank, they have a lot to answer for. For instance, becoming tremendously wealthy individuals off of the backs of, from money that they shouldn't be taking
or paying families of people that have murdered Jews, unfortunately, in terrorists.
Yes, there's a
tremendous amount of stipends every month.
Yeah, there's a lot
which is inconceivable.
There's a lot that's not good there. Also in the West Bank, but in the West Bank leadership, there is a lot that is good. For example, a lot of Israelis don't know this. I'm not making this up. You can go check it. For many years now, they work tremendously closely with our security forces, and they stop and prevent totally or at the bud or many attacks, potential and ones that lessen the so-called success. So you know.
Just the frightening statistic that I heard and
Yes.
I was given is that if the elections were held, the Palestinian elections, which now have been postponed,
Yeah.
the last elections was held 15 years ago,
Yeah.
they were worried that Hamas would come in the West Bank as well.
Yeah.
Because of, and then,
Yeah.
wow, that would change.
For the polls of people, even in Hamas-controlled Gaza and in the West Bank, is not so popular with Hamas. I got news for you. There are a significant number, but that's not today. That really is not the overwhelming number.
Okay, so I just want to ask you,
Yes.
Getting back to
Yes.
the States,
Yeah.
what did you do your PhD in?
Yeah. Well,
And where did you do your PhD?
yeah, I did it at Harvard.
Just to get admitted to Harvard, was it very difficult?
Not for me, for some reason. Because I actually thought of that. It came to mind for some reason. You think back to stuff that was already many years ago, But no, I applied to Harvard, and
what was your PhD on?
well, technically it was an EDD because it was through the School of Education. It was my doctorate, but it's a doctorate nevertheless. And I took a lot of education courses, like with Israel Scheffler and others, if you know the philosopher of education. But Don Oliver was tremendously influential in the School of Education. But most of my courses were in Jewish studies, mostly with Professor Tursky.
At Harvard?
Yeah, including independent study, which I don't know if he was exaggerating, but when I asked him if we could do an independent study, he said he never gives independent studies, but okay, we could do that. So that was kind of one of the, and then inviting me to his home, and I was part of their synagogue, the Tursky Talner Shul. God, when he died, I literally could not stop crying for many hours. What a person.
And were you close with Avram Tursky?
No, I didn't. I never met him. Yeah. The Tursky family is very big.
It's a very large family. Also, he was also very influential. And,
when I would go back, I mentioned for the summers when I was living in Israel to the National Young Judea camp for the high school age. So I would always stop by before in Boston to, say hello to the Turskys. And usually, instead of going straight back to Israel after camp, I would stay with them for Rosh Hashanah, and then go back. So one funny story was that right before camp, I went and I, buzzed their door in Boston, in Brookline. And Atar, a doctor, she also, as I say, was a doctor of American history and taught at Brookline Public High School for many years. So she, one of Rabbi Soloveitchik's daughters. So she answered the door, very warmly, and she called upstairs. Right, it was one of these houses, where there was the entrance with a small area, and then the stairs going upstairs. So she yelled upstairs, "Guess who's here, dear?" And you hear a voice saying, "It must be Steve." So he starts coming down the stairs, and she says, "How did you know it's Steve?" And he said, well, first of all, he wrote us the dates he would be coming, and he always stops by before he goes off to New York to camp. And then he laughed, and he said, and the other reason is because everybody else is scared of us. They wouldn't just buzz the house without, arranging it first. Because both of them, especially Rabbi Twersky, actually not. She was very warm and outgoing, really, but he had a certain demeanor which was a little bit, more than a little bit, kind of elevated, and. But if you would get to know him, he really was very warm, and he was very. So this is what he was referring to. So he laughed. He says, everybody else is scared of us. They're not just going to stop by. Only Steve, stops by. But I don't know. That's kind of my nature. Is if you care about someone, and if you're, then really it's something very warm, and yeah.
And Prof, how was your time at Harvard?
Well, it was very rich, you know. Yeah, it was extraordinary. My plan, I knew that I was planning to go back to Israel to make Israel my home. So, you know, I was looking forward to that also.
Was your family Zionistic? Did they instill this love
Yes, yes. My mother sang on Yiddish radio also Hebrew Zionist songs. Yeah. So there was a baby grand piano in the house. In the bedroom, there's a drawing of a piano there. It was a Zion because she in high school was part of Junior Hadassah and you know etc. and was very active in Hadassah. So it was a home. I mean, they didn't know Hebrew, you know, they didn't. And she didn't go to college, my mother, because all of her friends went to college, but her parents couldn't afford, so she didn't go. But our house was full of books, and books about Judaism a lot, about all kinds of things, and was full, of course, of music, the music scores, and you know, records, and then cassettes. And so, you know, and she said as a child, and then we went together a lot when, you know, with me, but she says when she was a child, and when her, even for summers, her friends, all their parents could afford to send them to summer camp, but her parents couldn't afford. So, you know, that was also very formative for me, you know, and then my father had a shoe store for 20 years or 25 years and then went bankrupt because of the chain stores. You know, these chain stores, it's almost impossible for independent, and then financially things were very difficult.
It's very hard to compete.
Yeah, and then people, our financial life was very difficult. That also was very formative for me, you know. And yet, again, there was no tension in the family. The love between my parents and towards us, you know, was extraordinary. You know.
So after you obtained your PhD, did you make
straight back to Israel? Yeah.
And you made your home here?
Yes, I made my home here, and I started right away at teaching at the Center for Jewish Education at Hebrew University, and met Mike Rosenack. Over the years, I taught at Pardes a lot, also Machon Pardes, and then mainly it was because I kept getting letters from Harvard that I owed them money for my student loans for the doctorate, even though they had said when I signed them, because I said to them, I'm going to be living in Israel and I'm making an Israeli salary, which doesn't compare to an American salary. It would be hard to repay it. And I was told that they were the type of loans that, you know, that would be taken into account and then I would be freed from them. But it turns out that they were a type of government loan that you couldn't do that. So every year I sent like $500 out of a huge amount of money, you know, for the doctorate. So I finally said, I'm going to go back to Boston for 5 years to Hebrew College, which was its heyday, moving to a new campus and everything. And I enjoyed tremendously teaching there, but the 5 years turned into, which is a strange phrase, turned into 19 years I was teaching at Hebrew College. And then I came back to Israel.
And when did you start your interest and your passion for like Holocaust studies?
Well, I was always, Holocaust was it was critical, you know. I remember as a teenager, before becoming involved and reading more, because Young Judea affected me to read more about Judaism. But as I said, I lived in a house with a lot of books, probably most of them about Jewish themes. So I cared very much, very profoundly. But it always rose my compassion and identification with the Jewish people, but also with all peoples, you know, with all peoples. My attention to what prejudice is can't just be the prejudice that was towards us. It can be the prejudice towards other peoples, including from us to them, you know, to other peoples. And also I really want to share with you, and probably, this is not a video, it's too long, it's just life. I don't know, this is like, moving in with me for a few days or something. But maybe you'll make it into several parts. I don't know. But so crucially important, for me, is again, the universal, that we're all, it's about all of us. But I wanted to go on to another theme, really, which is related. My understanding with the word under, elevated, of what we call God, the divine. I'm a very religious person. I experience, when I'm in prayer, study, the miracle of everything. But it's nothing like a person. And I would say, forgive me, most religious Jews think of God, relate to what we call, the reality we call God, that it's a person-like thing. It's going to answer our prayers. Remember what I said about the Menachem Nachum of Chan? There are others. Actually, the Maggid of Mezrich, and for sure the Rambam, and even the Ari says, Hakol biyadei ha'adam. Everything depends on the human being. So again, there's the promises of God that we experience in some way, about a messianic, about a time of fixing, tikkun, the wrongnesses, the injustices of the world. But there's also free will is given to us. And if people mess up, we mess up. And then it's not going to happen, the fixing, the betterment. So that, but again, you say the Shema, for example, Echad. Most people think of Echad means one with God. No. The expression, the rabbis, and this is not just a matter of opinion, this is the expression for it. Yichudo shel Hashem. Yichud means the uniqueness of God. The divine is unique, totally unique, meaning there's only one, is one of a kind, that's it. One of a kind. Because it's, now, Steve, then how do you relate to it at all? I do. When I stand in prayer, there's a halakha that you should pray to an empty wall. Now, there's different interpretations of that. But one of them is, because you're not, it's not a thing. God is nothing like anything we know. But how do you can get close to it or something, or a glimpse? Through, for example, study of Talmud, for example, the intellect. Because when you in the intellect in Talmud, you have to try to think of something that you hadn't thought of.
To create something.
Create something you hadn't thought of. To listen to another opinion. I think the word most often appearing in the Bible, in the Talmud. Something like that. In the Talmud is Aleph, Lamed, Aleph. People will think this is ridiculous, but I don't think I'm exaggerating. Aleph, Lamed, Aleph. This is the word most repeated in the Talmud. What does it mean? I would translate it, but rather. But rather. When they're arguing in the Talmud, everybody is really into their point of view.
But everybody is given an opinion.
But everybody is open to that always there's the possibility of but rather, because it depends on the situation. It depends on this, it depends on that. According to whom? It's never stam. It's never just X is what it is, Aleph is what it is, Bet is what it is, Lamed. No, this opinion is what it is. No, it's an opinion. There's always a but rather. This is the Yichudo Shel Hashem. You open yourself to the unique, to the difference, and that includes a different idea, a different possibility of seeing something in your life, a different way of seeing yourself, a different way of relating to an opinion that you didn't recognize worth in that opinion, value in a Talmudic or whatever, and again in other people, a different person who's a different age than I am, or a different political view here in Israel, or not a Jew, or an animal, or a cloud, or a this is what, to me, what it's all about. What it's all about. So again, the divine, and another example of engaging strangers in the street. So I'm in a store, in Machane Yehuda, near Machane Yehuda, Rehov Agrippus, and I overhear a couple with an American accent dressed, with modern dress, but religious kind of longer dress, whatever. People in their 50s, maybe 60, man and his wife, I assume, and they're talking about someone in their family who has cancer, and they're saying, God will heal the person. So I say, complete stranger, I say, that's how I start always. I say, and they were American, they said in English, so I said in English. I said, no, God isn't serving us, we serve God. God can't heal, because God isn't anything like a person. God is infinity. God is, and we can catch some glimpse of that, but it means to, open your mind. Your mind has to be bigger than that. And cancer is caused by stuff that mainly stuff that we put into all of our food and air. Not mainly, actually, this is what it is. If you look at the science of it, what the scientists tell us, all forms of cancer are caused by, now there are other diseases that are a part of the human condition, naturally, but we don't live forever, we die, And even so-called life after death has to be reinterpreted, because it's not physical. You're dead, because only God lives forever, because it doesn't live. It's, But that doesn't mean, then someone will jump and say, Steve, so then you don't believe in God. So then how do you pray? I pray. I pray in the synagogue. I pray here at home. And I really am standing before, Now, yes, some of the language of some of the prayers, healing, but Steve, it says God heals, etc. It's true. But again, you look at some of these, many of these books, there are opinions in the Talmud, there are opinions of Rambam, there are Maimonides, there are opinions of other thinkers less known than Maimonides, who say that's for the average person who can't conceive of something beyond that. But so all of us should say it together with them. Or it can have another meaning. It doesn't have to have a literal meaning. Now, here's one of my drawings of Emily. I don't know if you can see it a little bit, of Emily Dickinson. And I might have a 1 second, or just 1 second. I really love Emily Dickinson. Here's one of my drawing of her. It's one of my favorite drawings.
It's magnificent, yeah.
Now, maybe we'll end, because we have to end somewhere, because we're not God, we're not infinite, and But this is my Siddur. It's a wonderful little addition. It says, "Know before whom we stand."
Yeah. And it's often, when you go to a synagogue,
it'll say that.
in front of the Aron Kodesh, it says, And my aesthetic sensibility, it's very beautifully done, the calligraphy there, if you can get it. Very lovely.
and it's hardcover, which is nice for small. You can't. They stopped publishing this type. It's a wonderful thing. Look how beautiful the
top.
But yeah, but what I want to here's a drawing of a leaf. It's two-sided, and I keep it in my Siddur. But I want to show you something. Can you see it? I've pasted into the Siddur some of my drawings, like Paul Celan. And here's another one of my leaves. And also, I love poems and Hasidic stories that I've typed and pasted into the Siddur.
Very special.
Like, listen, look, can I just share one or two of them?
Sure.
Look at this one. I mean, I love this. It's about Aharon of Karlin, one of the Hasidic masters. So Aharon of Karlin gets up to lead the prayers one time. So he starts with the Don Olam, if you really, in the morning prayers. So he starts the traditional chant. Adon Olam. And then he stops. For like 2 minutes, 3 minutes, a long time. Then he continues, and when he finishes leading the prayers, all Hasidic stories, except the structure of all Hasidic stories, except Rabbi Nachman's, because Rabbi Nachman has a plot with characters, So then what you talk about is, what does it mean, the story. But all other Hasidic stories have the same structure, which is the Rebbe does something strange, and then the Hasidim have to ask, what was going on. So afterwards, the Hasidim come over to him and they say, what happened? Why did you pause, like that for quite a while after you began the chant, Master of the Universe, Adon Olam? So he says, because, I have said in leading prayers and on my own, I've chanted this prayer, Adon Olam, etc., Master of the Universe, 10,000, I don't know how many times, but only this time I suddenly was struck with a realization, and that was so powerful that, it just made me silent for a little bit. I suddenly realized that either way, it's my fault. If God is really the Master of the Universe, I always thought that I knew that really he is, but if he really, really is, then I'm not really realizing that enough and really doing enough, living enough in the presence of such a reality. So then it's my fault. But remember, he said, I realize that either way it's my fault. If God is the Master of the Universe really, so then it's my fault that I haven't really lived up to that. But if God isn't the Master, see, I'm starting to choke up with tears.
It's very,
but
very profound.
if God is not the Master of the Universe, then that's my fault also. We have to make God present by our actions towards one another, towards ourselves, with what we do with our lives.
I think here, could you discuss Janusz Korczak, because he is such an example of exactly what you were saying.
Yeah. Well, Janusz Korczak was from a very assimilated, family. He didn't even know Yiddish. This is one of my drawings of him.
It's superb.
Where is he? This whole thing from here to here is translations into English and Hebrew of his books, from here to here. This is from a film by Andrzej Wajda, famous for people who are into films, international films, Polish filmmaker, probably Poland, together with Krzysztof Kieslowski, the most famous. There are several really big film artists from Poland. Poland has an awful lot of, poets and writers and philosophers. Czeslaw Miłosz, with an L in English, who was a great friend of the Jews and wrote profoundly against protesting and the Holocaust. Czeslaw Miłosz. Many poets. Well, Janusz Korczak was from an assimilated Jewish family. He didn't even know Yiddish. This is from a film by Andrzej Wajda called Korczak, and you can rent it, excuse me for the advertisement, from Amazon for like $6 or something. It's in black and white, the film, and it's an amazing film. And I have studied Janusz Korczak a lot. I was told that the course at Hebrew University here in Jerusalem that I taught on Janusz Korczak was the first time anyone taught a whole course on Janusz Korczak. I called it The Spiritual Life of Children, according to Janusz Korczak. And they figured almost everybody in Israel, most Jews anyway, many Jews, have heard of Janusz Korczak. But they thought, that most don't. So they gave me a small seminar room for about, 12 people. And about how many people showed up? About 40, 50 people showed up for this course called Janusz Korczak, The Spiritual Life of Children, according to Janusz Korczak. And out of the some 40 students, about a dozen were Palestinian Israeli citizens who are students at Hebrew University, Christians and Muslims. They came also to the course. And how did I teach the course? If you're getting to know me a little bit through this interview or this streaming out loud of different thoughts of what is most dear to me, my credo, my ani ma'amin, you'll already be able to guess that I didn't teach it by lecturing. So, for example, he has a piece that he wrote, "Why do I clean up after the children from their eating, after eating or whatever?" He was very famous in Poland during his life. He wrote several books that became very famous, and he gave a series of radio talks and giving advice of how to act in different situations to children and to parents. And so he was very well known in Poland. And anyway, check out the Andrzej Wajda film.
So why did he clean up after the children?
Thank you. So what would happen is he was so famous that there were many people who came to visit the orphanage, before the war. And they would ask, where's, we came to meet Dr. Korczak. He taught at Warsaw University about children and everything. And this is a scene from the film where he brought one of the children to one of his lectures, and he did something there with the child. But they would come, and he'd be wearing like a janitor's, something over his clothes, because he was cleaning up, and they would see him cleaning up the floor or the dishes, and they would say, "Where is, Dr. Korczak?" And he would kind of play with them a little bit for a while, but then someone else would tell them, or he would then say, I'm Dr. Korczak, Janusz Korczak, and they would be, surprised because he was so famous. He shouldn't be, just cleaning up after, the children. So Janusz Korczak, if you look on the web, online, for a website called Academia, just like it sounds, ACADEMIA, academia.edu. Many professors of Jewish studies, French studies, science, everything, they put their papers there, and for nothing you can see them. And if you'll go to academia.edu and put in my name, Steve,
it appears. I've done it. Actually gone through.
And I have about 27 of my essays, and now I just added, by the way, 3 videos of me teaching, sharing learning texts, certain religious Talmudic texts, and talking about Psalm 23. So you can go to academia.edu. If I haven't scared you away already, you can see.
I would highly recommend.
Yeah. So why do I mention it related to Korchak? Because I have a couple of writings there. One of them is just 1.5 pages, where there was, when I was in Boston, Brandeis University had a film festival of Andrzej Wajda's films, and one of them is Korchak. So they asked people to offer a short introduction, very short, to each of the films, and then to lead a discussion afterwards. So you'll see that my little introduction that I wrote in the style of Korchak's writing, because he had a very special style of writing. And you'll also see my long essay, not too long, I don't want to frighten you, but regular length essay on what I call Janusz Korczak's philosophy of religious idealism. Realistic idealism. Realistic idealism. You see? And you can hear from others of what I'm sharing with you that I try to be a realist idealist. You know, as I say, people will ask me, how is life, Steve? You know, and I say it's varied. They get upset, because they're surprised, because you're supposed to say it's great, God is great, I don't know, something like that. No, you have to be realistic.
And can I ask, is it true that with Janusz Korczak that he was given the opportunity to save himself?
Yes.
But he decided to go with the children.
Yes, there appears to be substantial evidence. In the movie it's shown where a woman, Nazi soldier, is given the word that he is exempt from entering the train with Stefa Vilchinsky, who was his co-director. She went on Aliyah, by the way. Korchak was in Israel at Kibbutz Ein Harod for 2 visits of about a few weeks, and he wanted to stay in Israel, but he said in Palestine, the Jewish community of Israel then, but he said that he couldn't abandon his children in Poland, so he went back. Stefa stayed at Kibbutz Ein Harod, became a member of the kibbutz, and lived there for about a year. But when the Nazis came to power, and it was becoming threatening to Poland, and Korczak was becoming very depressed about the situation, she went back. I think it was in August, the beginning of August. They were at a Korczak summer camp. And then there was a Christian summer camp. He had Christian devotees, and the anti-Semitism was so high that, society wouldn't really, most of it, a lot of it, too much of it, go along with his doing stuff directly with Christian. So he had colleagues who were going by his ideas of education, like Stefa Vilchinsky, and she was at their summer camp, and then and they set up, by the way, his Christian friends, a safe house. They bribed the Nazis, and they had a safe house that they just had to convince him to go with them, and he would be able to be safe through the war. But of course, he just said that's. In fact, in the movie, there's a scene where he says to them, Stefa Vilchinsky. No, Stefa Vilchinsky was his co-director. What was her name? The Christian. At the moment, I'm thinking so many thoughts but one of his most dear Christian disciples came with the writing that would free him allow him to get out, to escape the ghetto. And he just said to her, "How can you offer me such a thing when you, of all people, know me so well?" And she was starting to choke up. No, he was going to go with the children. So the same thing is a scene in the film where this military Nazi woman he says, "Where's Korchak?" And they were boarding. The scene shows that they were boarding the cattle cars with the kids. And they came up, and when he saw that she was coming with, waving in her hand, a document, he figured what it might be, and he just turned his back and entered the car, and they closed the doors.
And he was one of the. He was killed. He was killed in the death camps.
He was not just killed. Of course, he was murdered. There's my realism again. He was murdered with his approximately 200 children at Treblinka.
Yeah.
How can such things?
But he epitomizes that philosophy of who am I?
Yeah.
My money for myself. He was prepared to go with his children.
And these universal ideas of God, and that God, he was very religious, but that God is not some human-like thing. I wanted to, and I will do that. In here, there's a poem by Emily Dickinson, and there's all kinds of stuff in here. Yeah, and this is, by the way, a picture of Baruch Spinoza. Here, there's one of my drawings of based on this drawing of, but here's a poem by Emily Dickinson. My period had come for prayer. No other art would do. But my tactics missed a rudiment, an element. She says, I'm about to pray. But then I realized I'm missing something. Creator, was it you? She was just going to maybe say the words, but God grows above. So those who pray horizons must ascend. And so I stepped upon the north, which in the book of Job is this kind of cold, not so friendly, to see this curious friend. His house was not, no sign had he by chimney, nor by door could I infer his residence, but rather all I saw was vast prairies of air, nothingness, nothing. Unbroken by a settler, not divided up. That's what meaning is. We make meaning by distinctions, and no. Vast prairies of air, unbroken by a settler, were all that I could see. Infinitude, hadst thou no face that I might look on thee? The last paragraph, the last 4 lines. The silence. And she asks God, she says, she turns to infinitude, to the God, to the divine, and says, hast thou no face that I might look on thee? The silence condescended. It didn't rebuke me, but it kind of just, it let me be, but it didn't answer me directly. Creation stopped for me. I think that means something very special, though, was, the wonder of it all. But awed beyond my errand, her goal was to pray. But pray in the sense, again, like God is some human-like thing that is going to answer my prayers in some literal sense or something. The silence condescended. Creation stopped for me, but awed beyond my errand, I worshipped, did not pray. And she puts pray in quotes. So yes, I was worshiping. I'm praying. But it's not pray. The word pray, for example, in English really means ask. I wasn't asking. Here comes back what I've tried to share about how I try to live my life. It's not about me. It's about the other through an idea or an opinion in the Talmud or in literature or in art, opening myself other people who don't have had the opportunities I have had, or have a different opinion that I should try to open myself to, or who haven't had the opportunity, or whatever it is,
And Prof, can I ask you, maybe we'll end off this wonderful quote that you gave by Vincent van Gogh with the Kotzke.
Oh, yes.
I think that is really something.
Did I bring that over here?
I think we have it over here.
Yeah. Well, this is this is one of my drawings of Van Gogh. Just kind of a quick sketch.
You wrote one of his quotes.
Yeah, and I love Van Gogh's artist. His paintings are amazing. Yeah. By the way, what was that Van Gogh movie that was done with actors, but with artists who painted it like in the style of Van Gogh, and the whole movie is their paintings. You have to go see that. I forget the name.
They've had it at a few places.
Yeah. So I came across through his writing. His brother supported him financially, Theo.
Because he didn't sell. He didn't sell in his lifetime.
Yeah, the people that thought that wasn't, So he was supported by his brother, and he wrote his brother many, many, many letters, and the many editions you can buy. And in one of the letters, he says, "Truth is so dear to me, and so," or I would say, "but," or an Aleph Lamed Aleph, but rather, "so is the seeking to make it true." I was very struck by that. Truth is so dear to me, but trying to make what you see to be true. Now, of course, you can see to be true that all Jews or all Palestinians or all whoever are no good, or everybody who's on the right in Israel, who I'm a so-called right when I'm on the so-called left politically, that these are often are truths, but you don't want to make those true. But wonderful. Truth is so dear to me, but so is the seeking to make it true. So I really love that. And then, I don't remember if it was a year later or whatever, but you have to have a password for stuff, on the computer or on your phone. So one of my passwords is Kotsk 1859. Menachem Mendel of Kotsk, the great Hasidic thinker, rabbi, and that's the year of his death, 1859. Now, by the way, the Kotzker, I'm not sure if this is one of the stories of the Kotzker, but one of the stories I love is Hasidic stories, is about how a man in Jerusalem, for a practical joke, goes on the Mount of Olives and blows the shofar. That's the tradition that would be announcing the arrival of the Messiah. So everybody, most people in the city are all, get excited, and they're all, drop everything they were doing, and one of them runs to this rabbi, and I haven't been able to identify. If anybody out there seeing this knows, let us know. But it could very well be Menachem Mendel of Kotsk. They come to a Hasidic Rebbe to his study, and they say, "Rebbe, the day we've all been waiting for has arrived. The Messiah is coming. We just heard the shofar blast from Eliyahu from the Mount of Olives." So the Rebbe gets up without getting excited, and he walks over to a window. By the way, there's a halacha that synagogues should have a window. And the Rav Kook says that's because Avraham Yitzchak HaKohen Kook, here he is, yes. These are my heroes here, all these pictures. I have many heroes. That says that the reason you have to have windows in a synagogue is because the prayers are about changing the world, relating them, implementing them in the real world, to fix tikkun, the world. So, what were we saying? So I love his writings, and one second, there it is. This is a book of his ideas, Emet Ve'emunah, and you can see I paste in all kinds of all kinds of stuff, and I've noted all kinds of passages. And one of them that I came across, a year or two after encountering the Van Gogh saying that truth is dear to me, but also making it true. And I was sharing it with you, Les. And you can see I've pasted it in from that book in Hebrew, which he he definitely said in Yiddish. And then someone wrote it down in Hebrew. And usually they said these things on Sabbath and holidays. So somebody who heard it would then afterwards, write it down. So what he says, what the Kotzker Rebbe says, is that the spies who, there were 12 spies who went to let the army know, to Moshe and the Jewish army, the Hebrew army, who would go into the land of Canaan that was promised to them, and that they send spies to know what are they going to be dealing with, of who's there, and the enemy, and the army, and how strong are they. And so the Kotzker Rebbe says that the issue with the 10 of the 12 scribes out of 2 was, who was it? Joshua and Caleb were the 2 that said it's possible, it's okay. But the other ones said, the enemy is huge, giants, and it's no good.
You're like grasshoppers.
Yeah, it's not going to be so easy. So the Menachem Mendel of Kotsk, the Kotzker Rebbe, says, in terms of what the spies, the 10 of them, said, they actually were describing the true situation. But truth is not just describing, noticing a situation as it is. Truth is noticing in a situation what needs to be addressed with the word truth as a verb, which in Hebrew is the PL construct. You want to la'amet, lidaber, la'amet, to make something true. You have to look at a situation and say, not describe what it is, but say what needs to be fixed in that situation. That would be the true situation. Well, there's a saying, there's a traditional saying, when someone hears or offers a Torah idea, which then you see some great Torah scholar, living or dead, who's still alive for us, because we learn from them, said. So, that's what, so, I couldn't believe this juxtaposition that Van Gogh's idea we can also see here. So this is also what I got excited for, is that it reflects also my universality. I have books here from European and American literature and philosophy and Greek and Palestinian, and so this is a little bit of my sharing.
So
Thanks.
Steve, I just want to thank you. I'm going to so if I could just mention
Yes.
something very brief.
Yes.
No, so if you could sit.
Yeah. Yes.
Interesting thing about the universality, if you take Judaism,
Yes.
this is how I've been brought up. So Hashem, God, He listens to the prayers of everyone. It's not only if you're Jewish or if you're religious, but He listens to the prayers of everyone. And everyone, according to Judaism, has a place in Olam Haba, in the next world. You don't have to be Jewish.
Yeah.
So that distinguishes Judaism a lot from all the other religions. Because in many of the other religions, in fact all the other religions, only if you believe in that religion do they feel that you go to God or that you have a place in the paradise. But in Judaism, it's not. And in Judaism, everyone can actually become Jewish. It's an amazing thing.
This is true.
It shows the universality of Judaism and
this is
and of
true,
Hashem.
but I would say to some extent, and not as, excuse me, that I say, not to the extent that, again, please forgive me, that you think. Really, when you look, number one, there's two issues here. When you look at Judaism, there's Judaisms, because there are many views in Rabbinic Judaism, in the Talmud, that are at odds with exactly what you just distinguished. And then there are many that are making that argument. So we have those other views within Judaism, number one. And then in other religious traditions, if you really look, whether it's Sufism, which is a kind of mystical approach within Islam, and also not only the Sufism within Islam, also in Islamic texts from different countries, etc., and in Christianity, even before modern. There are some, Thomas Aquinas, others, there are voices that do embrace the universality, and I have some of those books, here. Many of these books are that. So that I discovered that. So I think that,
well, we hope that, please God, when the Messiah will come, there'll be peace on earth for everyone, for the whole world. That nation will not lift sword against nation, nor will they learn war anymore. Well, and the lion will dwell with the lamb. So we have the hope, we have the emunah that we'll have a better world and for all of mankind.
Yes, we have that. Though again, if you look even on that issue of what the Messianic will be as related to other nations, other religions, we have a prejudiced opinion that doesn't embrace that universality easily found in our Jewish sources. And again, in non-Jewish sources, we can find, without too much difficulty really, the universal ideas as well, embraces. So,
but Yeshayahu says that, anyway, our prophets prophesied. Anyway, but I want to thank you so much.
Well, again though, the prophets are mighty critics, and they really are mainly arguing what I was saying about that Menachem Nachman of Chernobyl, even the Maggid of Mezrich, and certainly the Rambam and others. But you find that in the biblical prophetic voice as well, that it is up to the human being. And there's a wonderful midrash, very very short, that when the people were leaving Jerusalem in exile now with the destruction of the temple, many of them saw Jeremiah. Suddenly they saw, there's Jeremiah leaving with us. And they ran over to him and they said, please, do you have some words, some at least words of comfort, of hope? And he rebuked them and he said, if you would have cried one tear in Zion, in other words, if you would have listened to my social critiques of society, of military, of foreign policy, of the poor among us, etc., with the government policies of our king and etc., then we would not be weeping one tear in Zion. We would have been okay, but it was up to us. So,
well, we have the power. Hashem's given us the power.
This is true.
And everyone makes a difference. Each and every person can make a difference.
I'm with you 100%. Yeah.
Well, I want to thank you so much.
Remember my term from Martin Korchak, realistic idealism.
Yeah.
So that,
Well, Prof, I really want to thank you very, very much. It's been a great honor and a privilege to be with you.
Thank you so much. My thoughts for everybody that I don't know and that I do know that might see this, and if they want to be in touch with me, they know how, perhaps through you, I would be thrilled. Yes, be honored.
Thank you very much.